Today we're going to talk about Cyclone 3DR. And if you've never really heard of it or just curious about it or simply are on here to get some questions answered, hopefully we'll be able to do some of those questions at the end. But this is a little bit of a reintroduction of software, if you will. So I'm going to get started with my PowerPoint, and I promise you all I will not have a long PowerPoint, but just a couple of slides here. And, you know, we want to ask ourselves the question of what is 3DR? Where did it come from? So, you know, by Leica's own definition, I'll let you all read that there. Cyclone 3DR, by my definition, is just an extremely powerful tool that allows us to bring in data from all different data sources, whether you're using terrestrial scanner, a point cloud from maybe a drone, or you're bringing in data from CAD or another modeling tool. All of that data can be consumed here in Cyclone 3DR. And we then want to answer or ask the question, where did it come from? Did Leica just, you know, one day wake up and say, hey, let's create this piece of software? Well, the simple answer to that is no. For those of you who have been around a while and who have kind of followed the history of Leica and Hexagon, the parent company of Leica, you may have heard of this software a little while ago referred to as Technodigit's 3D Reshaper. Okay, and as a matter of fact, you will probably hear me say at some point during this presentation, I will probably call this Reshaper. It's just, I guess, been using it a while and something that's kind of gotten into my brain. So I will do my best to stay with Cyclone 3DRs to not confuse anyone. But yeah, so this software has been around a while. Hexagon ended up purchasing the 3D Reshaper tools and ultimately the whole software. And over the past year, or pretty much, I guess, 6 months, has rebranded it to Cyclone 3DR. So, you know, I know sometimes on these webcasts we get people from different disciplines, and they're kind of wondering about different softwares. And what I want to kind of cover next is just simply who might use this software. Okay, are we catering to one group, or can multiple people or multiple groups use this software? And I can tell you just a little story. Is when I first started looking at this and didn't really know what it was about, my first reaction was, that's not for me. That's for people who are kind of in the media and entertainment side of things, where they're modeling and meshing pieces and parts, and that's really not for me. So I don't really need to learn that. And then there was a gentleman who actually taught me how to use it, who was just fantastic with the software. And he's kind of sat me down and said, well, wait a minute, what about this and this and this and this? And so I was like, oh, whoa, great, that's going to work. So let's take a look. Who is going to use this software? And I'm going to start with kind of where I came from. Civil engineers, surveyors, all of those folks can use this software, okay? So as we progress into technology, into different disciplines, you know, I find, and this is not a slam by any means on civil engineers and surveyors, but I find those groups seem to take a little longer to adapt to some of the technology. And now we're seeing that some of those folks have said, all right, well, great. We're going to start using drones, and we're going to start using terrestrial scanners. And one of the things that I've found is, man, sometimes that data is just, it's a lot of data for what we're used to in the civil engineering world. So we're going to take a look at how this data can be used. But for now, let's talk about other groups, right? And we jump in over into the architects. And, you know, by no means is Reshaper, or I did it already, Cyclone 3DR, by no means is it going to go ahead and compete with Revit. And that's not its intent, okay? But what it can do is quickly be able to model some existing conditions from point cloud data. Or we can take our Revit models and bring them into the 3DR and be able to analyze how we modeled a building versus how it was actually built. And then we can monitor the way that building might shift over time. And again, we can take a look at some of that data as well. So then we can move on to MEP or plant engineers. You know, from being able to create cylinders for pipes and look at the any deviation in the floors, maybe. All of that data can be looked at. Maybe where we're going to put down some new equipment and we want to make sure the floor is level. We can look at that in 3DR and be able to say, okay, well, wait, that equipment's not going to sit right because there's a huge dip in the floor here. Okay. All right. And then the last one I'm going to cover, but it's certainly not this is not the limits of the software. Artists, historians, we might find folks who are looking for the software to recreate pieces and parts to objects. One of the things that comes to mind is a while back we did a scan in a library about some of the moldings in that library that they wanted to recreate, and we scanned it. And then that can be brought in to this 3DR and mesh, and then finally reprint that mesh into a new piece of molding. So we're getting historically correct pieces and parts, right? So again, these are just some of the folks who are using this software or might use the software, and it's certainly not limited to. I'm sure there's just a ton of other folks out there that could use the software that I have not mentioned or I haven't thought about, but certainly, you know, you'll find your own way to use it, hopefully, and feel free to reach out to me and let me know how you're using it, right? So with all of that said, what can be done with the software, right? Well, I'm going to start with talking a little bit about some of the AEC industry and buildings. And one of the common things that I run into with folks using 3D laser scanners, you know, they might run out to a site, and on that site they scan, and then maybe a little while later they go out and they scan another piece, and the scans are all rotated and not put together well. Well, they want to put them together, and, you know, many folks will use a registration software. You know, Leica obviously has some, but we can also do that here in 3D Reshaper, where we can align two different point clouds just by simply clicking a couple of the same points, right? And that will allow me to put those two separate pieces together, and then I can use them to mesh objects from there if I like. All right. One of the other things we can use this for is point cloud cleanup. And once again, I'm sure there are folks sitting there saying right now, well, geez, I can do that with, well, whatever software you're using. And again, it might be Register 360. It might be another software that you're using with your scanner. And totally understand, that's fine. But the reason I wanted to bring this up on this webcast was because point cloud cleanup in this software, it just has some extra tools that really make it kind of unique to anything I've seen before. And one of those tools you'll see there on the right. A lot of the tools that we've cleaned up point clouds with in the past have simply provided us with usually a box or a polygon shape to select points and then delete those points within that shape. Well, 3DR allows us to not only create that polygonal shape, but it allows us to extend that shape into a 3D form. So you can see I've got a full 3D box there. Now, for those of you out there that are using something like Register 360, you might do something like this with a limit box, and that tool works great. One of the reasons I like this one is because it's all in one. It's a selection tool limiting into a 3D space and allowing me to delete those points. All right? And then again, being able to take data and just mesh it, and then ultimately we can take this meshed data and push it out to another software. Okay? And then one of the other things, I'll come back to our surveyors and our civil engineers, right? One of the things that they might want to do is be able to create break lines. Now, this is something I've done often in Civil 3D, used a point cloud and been able to kind of trace the point cloud to get a break line. Well, we'll see a little later that 3DR has the ability to do scripting and put in some parameters that will allow us to create 3D break lines almost automatically. Okay? So what Leica's done here is Leica has said, okay, we're creating a solution that finishes off everything we've done so far. And you can see here we're able to, again, we're using Leica data here and Leica hardware, but you can capture the data. It does not have to be a Leica format. It does help, but it doesn't have to be a Leica format. We can use Register 360 to prepare that data, store that data, and manage that data in Jetstream, and then use the Jetstream data in Cyclone 3DR, making our point cloud run just a little bit faster. Right? All right. So, and then one of the last things here is just, being able to do everything I've said so far and just kind of some of the other tools. And so what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to go ahead and jump over to 3DR, and we're going to look at some of the workflows. So let me here, and we'll go like this. Okay. So this is Cyclone 3DR, and let me go ahead and move this over so it's out of the way, and you can see the full screen. Now, for those of you who have used 3D Reshaper in the past, this interface is a little bit different, right? At least color-wise, it's a little bit different. Some new tools have been added, and it's ribbon-based, which it was before, but this is just kind of following Leica's look and feel of some of their other softwares. All right, so one of the first things I want to cover kind of goes back to the civil space, and for those of you who have been to AU and things like that, you may have seen some of these data sets before. So I'm going to come in and take a look at a data set here that may have been picked up by, maybe a drone, maybe a terrestrial scanner. And again, what we're looking at just is kind of looks like a mess, but if we really look into it, we're looking at a roadway, and this roadway obviously had cars running down it. We've got kind of trees all on the sides. And if we wanted to create a ground model of everything we see here, you know, could it be done in Civil 3D? Absolutely. You know, we could get this point cloud over there. We could clean it up a bit and ultimately create a surface in Civil 3D from it. However, that workflow can be a little bit tedious, right? We don't want the tops of trees, so we're going to have to place points on here. So we can speed this process up in 3DR just using this point cloud. Okay? So again, I'm just going to spin around here to kind of show you what we've got. And I'm then going to come in and I'm going to say, all right, well, one of the things I might do, even if I had it over in Civil 3D, was be able to look at this in a way where it almost might look like a cross section. And so I'm going to create a slice through my y-axis, and you can see it creates kind of a pane where I'm going to be able to place the beginning part of my section. So I'll place the beginning, and then I'll just place another quick one right after it. And I now have a section of my roadway. Well, geez, this might be a good way for me to come in, and I might be able to say, draw a break line down through here and back up. Again, tracing the model. Well, I'm not going to do that, obviously, right? I could just simply move right through from section to section and trace each one. That's a little bit too much work, so I'm not going to do that, right? What I'm going to do is I'm going to come in, and you can see I got a tool palette here. I'm going to turn that slice off and get my full point cloud back. Well, I'm going to select that point cloud and be able to come in and using tools provided in 3DR, and by the way, this is nothing that Reimangined has added or anything like that. There's a DTM tool here that will allow me to set some parameters for my DTM. So what I'm setting here is what I believe to be the slope of my terrain on the sides. Right? And I'm going to click the preview button, and it's going to take a moment. And it always seems to take a little longer when you're waiting for it, right? There we go. So even with that processing time, notice I've cut out the trees. I've told it the side slope, and I've created a surface here. Now, if I'm okay with this, I can say okay. And I can come in and I can simply turn off my point cloud and view the resulting terrain. Now, this can be exported as a DTM if I want. This can be exported right over to AutoCAD as a mesh. Either way, I can make a surface out of this, right? So then maybe I want to get a little bit more information from this. So I'm going to come in and click on this mesh and go to extract, where I'm going to ask for this software to create some contour lines. And these contour lines, I'm going to create 5-foot contours in the interval between major contours and 10 feet. And of course, you can see the different colors here, right? So I'll say, okay, I now have contours on that surface. And just as an extra check, I can turn that cloud back on, and then I can turn on that slice again, and I'll go to my view and front, and let's look, how did the mesh do? Looks like it's doing a pretty good job to me. okay? And of course, we can, if we wanted, we can kind of move forward through and see, again, how the mesh did all the way through, right? So that's kind of one of the, the civil uses for 3DR, right? Create a quick DTM, get some contour data, and even if I wanted to, I could take that contour data and ship it right over to Civil 3D as contours and make the surface from that if I wanted to in Civil 3D. Okay, so let's try something else, right? Well, and I'm going to come in and do a. I'm going to skip over one here, and let's move on to a different discipline where I'm going to just create a new model. I won't save this one. And in this new model, everything's empty here. I want to be able to bring in some data, right? Again, I don't have anything. I don't have any point cloud in here. I don't have any building in here. So I have data sitting on the hard drive where I can bring in different file formats. And so one of the things that I really like about this is that Leica has made it very easy to bring in data. So I'm going to come over to File and Import, right? And I can go out and search for files if I want. Or on my other monitor here, I have a File Explorer open where I can just simply drag and drop, and my data's in. I hit Import, a little bit of processing time, and we can see that my data has been over here, but I don't see anything on the screen. And I think this is a very cool thing. 3DR allows me to determine what part of this building do I want to bring in. And by the way, that was an IFC file. Well, I'm going to say bring in the whole darn thing. All right. So I'll go to View, and we'll zoom all. And you can see my model is here in 3DR, right? Again, that was an IFC file. Well, what I want to do is I want to take my data, and I want to compare this model data to some point cloud data. Well, we know already, I told you that I could bring in CloudWorks data, and I have an LGS file. And that LGS allows me to bring in point cloud data. Well, now I have a problem, right? Because I brought in the point cloud data, and it doesn't match. Its elevation is off. This sometimes happens when we scan and we have model data coming from a different source. The elevations sometimes don't match, or rotations don't match. So in this case, I'm lucky enough that the elevations simply don't match. So what I need to do is figure out, and I can do that, by the way, figure out the elevation difference. I can measure from a particular point here and measure to that same point up in here. Let me grab my 3D orbit tool so you guys can see. Measure to that same point in the point cloud, right? And figure out what that distance is. Now, I already have that distance kind of written down here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to rotate this up a bit. Zoom out. All right. Now that I'm zoomed out, I'm going to go ahead and select the CAD data. And on my coordinate system tab, I can do a translation. So I'm going to translate that, and I got to make sure I tell it which direction I want to translate my model. Well, it happens that I've got it in the Z direction already. You can see by having the +1 there that I'm going in the Z direction. And this is my offset distance that I actually want to offset it. So I'm going to go ahead and say, well, I'm not quite confident in it, so I'm going to preview it and see what it looks like. We've moved our CAD model. we can see now that that data looks good. So yeah, I'm okay with it. I'm going to click OK, and we're going to move on. Right? So that's fitting right over. And now, sometimes what we want to do, like I was saying at the beginning of the webcast, is we want to be able to analyze our data, our point cloud data versus the model. So what I can do is I can come in here and I can create a box to isolate just the areas that I want to look at. And that's referred to as a limit box here. Well, watch what happens. When I click limit box and I come out and I start to click, look at my box here. That's not going to quite do what I want it to do, right? Because I want to look at just this facade here. Well, the limit box doesn't rotate it very well. So what I'm going to do then is I'm going to come in and I'm going to use my CloudWorks tab and I'm going to use a UCS and use the point cloud to create a UCS. So what I want to do is line this up one side to the other. And as soon as my mouse comes back here, bear with me. I'll click on that wall, and then I'll click on that wall. And I don't know how well you can see it, but if we look right here at my mouse, there is a UCS icon showing me the X, Y, and Z. So with that, I can go back to that View tab and redo my limit box. And, you know, I'll click out here, and then I'll expand, and I'll come way out here, and we'll pull up a little bit. So now I've isolated just an area that I want to look at. And this is a great tool. And one of the things that I also like about this is that I can come in and click on this limit box, and I can edit it after the fact. So maybe I want to pull this a little bit tighter. And maybe I want to pull this a little bit tighter. And we'll come down a little bit. Okay? So now I've edited my limit box, and I'm kind of good to go. Right? And then I'm going to go ahead and I want to take this LGS file that I was using, and I want to convert it to a point cloud that I can play with in 3DR. So there's a convert to clouds command here, and I'm going to click that, and this is going to take just a moment to convert this cloud. Now that I'm looking at it, I probably should have pulled my limit box out a little further. All right, there we go. Okay, so now I've converted my point cloud, and I can use some of the tools in 3DR to be able to kind of play around and use this point cloud. So what I'm going to do is, for now, I'm going to turn the point cloud off. And I'm going to use my selection tool. And I'm going to, actually, for now, I'm going to take my limit box. And you can see that limit box is getting in the way a little bit. So what I'm going to do is simply turn off its display. And now I want to kind of click the building. And I'm going to ungroup this CAD data. Remember, there were all different pieces to this. I'm going to ungroup it. And I'm going to choose to only show the facade of this, okay? And so now you can see that it's broken out just that piece. So now I'm going to switch my, my CAD data, and I'll turn that off, and we'll turn everything else on, right? And I'm going to, for the time being, I'm going to turn off my clipping. And so I'm going to select the rest of that data, and I'm going to regroup it. And I'm going to rename it so it makes sense, so the name makes sense. And I'm going to call this building. And I can turn that off, and I'll turn my facade back on, and I'll rename that one as well. As soon as, again, my mouse comes back. Okay. So I'll turn my limit box back on, and I'm going to turn my cloud back on. And I now want to check, again, like I said earlier, check and see how the model compares to the point cloud. So under the analysis, under the analysis tab here, I'm going to select the two objects, and I'm going to compare the cloud versus the CAD data. Okay? And when I go ahead and compare this, I'm going to say, let's preview it and look at what some of those colors look like. And you'll see here in a moment as this comes up. All right, so I'm getting kind of all different colors, and I'm getting a bar over here that's showing me all the different deviations from one to the other. Now, these colors can all be edited, right? So there's an edit color button here, where if I go ahead and change that, I can look and fit into different tolerances. So I'm going to click here, and I'm going to say that my top tolerance is 0.015, and then this tolerance is going to be minus 15 millimeters, right? And so we can see the different colors that are in this bar now, right? So I can say, all right, well, I like this, and I'm going to kind of keep it and say, oops, my 0.03, I should. Why won't my tolerance work? All right, there we go. I don't know what happened before, right? And then I'm going to go ahead and click OK again. Okay, and then I can use my measuring tools to measure the deviation in those different colors. And this is something that I just absolutely love about 3DR is notice how every time I click to place a label, it's adding a different label and it's moving the others around. Now, watch what happens as I zoom out, or if I pan or rotate. It kind of updates the labels. If I wanted to pull this over to this side, they would switch. And again, I just absolutely love that about 3DR. I don't have to do any kind of drafting. So with that, I'm going to say OK. And, you know, these labels, they kind of have a lot of information that I don't really care about. I don't really need. Right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come over under Compare and Inspect, and here's all my labels. I can do a Shift Select, and I can edit the content of these labels. For instance, I don't care about some of these items. I'm going to just simply turn them off and click OK. My labels update. Now they're only showing the 3D deviation to each point that I selected in my point cloud. Okay. All right, so that's kind of that one, and I want to show one of the other ones here, and we'll see how much time we have. One of the other ones I wanted to show was the scripting tool, and let's open this up. Okay, so what you can see is I've got a point cloud here that's kind of a roadway, and you know, I talked earlier about wanting to be able to kind of trace along this curb line to create break lines, right? Well, I can certainly do that, but that becomes a lot of work, and even in 3DR, if I was to do that, you know, we have to be careful, because sometimes what can happen is, you know, we might look at something the wrong way and click a point behind it. So we've got to be a little bit careful. But one of the things they've added to this software is if you're any sort of programmer out there, and you know, you have just a little bit of programming skills, you can go to and create your own scripts. And what I'm going to do is have it create a curb line for me. Well, in order to do that, I have to give it a start. So I'm going to come over and I'm going to extract, and I'm going to tell it, hey, create a polyline. And using my selection tool, I'm going to zoom in and get, you know, I don't have to do a very long line, but just get something close to the edge of that curve. Okay? And then once I finish and I know I've got the top of that curve, I can come back to scripting and I can do curve extraction. Now I'm going to enter variables like how often I want it to sample, its curb width, its curb height, its angle, all these sorts of things. And these are good for what I need. And I'm going to click OK. All right. Whoop. Forgot to select the line first. And so you're going to watch as this thing starts to go, I'm getting the top and bottom of the curbing. And you'll notice that it's not just creating a straight line. And I can kind of come along here, and you're going to see that we're going to get a tip down in the curb, and it's tipping down as well. Right? And then it'll come back up. And it's going to take a little while. I've run it a little bit close together, but it's going to finish this all off, and I'm going to end up with break lines. Or if it's done enough, I can feel free to just stop the scripting, and I'm still left with those break lines. Now, due to some time constraints, I do want to show one other thing here before we get too late in the hour. I'm going to come up and I'm going to say, all right, well, let's just pretend for a moment that I've gone ahead and I've created all the break lines that I want to create. Well, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to turn off the cloud, and I'm going to select the top and bottom of my curve. And now, one of the things I really like about this is I can right mouse click and do a send to AutoCAD. Now, if I have an Autodesk product open, I've now added these two 3D polylines, by the way. And those of you who are Civil 3D users will know, hey, look, this can be thrown right into the surface as 3D break lines. And I think that's pretty awesome. Okay. All right, I'm going to show you one more thing here as I come back, and we'll close out of this. And let's just talk for kind of a moment about, let me say, open, and we'll go to here. Okay. So as you can see, I've got a point cloud here, and this point cloud has a lot of noise around it, as we might call it, of different points. And, you know, sometimes we might get this when we get drone data, or if there's something in the air while we're scanning, or even if we created a point cloud. For those of you out there using photogrammetry, sometimes you get a little bit of noisy data if you use a camera that's not quite up to par. And what I mean by that is, like, for instance, I've created point clouds like this one using my phone and the 4K video, right? So anyway, I want to be able to come in and I want to be able to clean this point cloud. So I can simply select the point cloud, and I can go to my clean tab here, and I just want to clean up some of that noise. So I'll just click on noise, and my computer is going to laugh at me, and here it goes. It's gone ahead and marked what it believes is point cloud noise, right? So if I'm not really sure if I want to do that or not, I can simply turn off the noisy points and see what I'm left with. Okay, and if I like that, I can simply say okay. And, you know, we can then kind of twirl this around and look at it. And if we're still not happy, maybe we want to take different pieces of this point cloud and break it out. So we can come over once again to clean and separate, and we can kind of use some tools here like this polygon, where I might just select, and I want to get rid of that data down below there. Right? Now, one of the great options about this is I can just simply say, hey, you know what? Forget those points. I want to delete them. They're gone. Okay? Or I can come in and do something like, I want to break out and be able to model separately the wing on this angel. And so I can then say, hey, look, let's not delete it. I want to split it. And so with that, I can call this wing 1 or something like that and say okay. And what that does for me is creates an item on my tool palette that will allow me to turn that off or turn everything else off. And then I can go ahead and decide to 3D mesh this. And I'm going to do this very quickly. I want to leave you guys some time to ask some questions. And you can see that's just me hitting OK, not setting any settings or anything like that. And I can call that my mesh. Now, of course, I can refine that mesh to be something better than what it is,